Great.
Okay, Andy, good to see you again.
It's
Thanks
great to
for
see you, Paul.
thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. I wanted to kick off our conversation by picking up something that you said to me last time we spoke. You said to me that AI is going to both change the constraints that face your business and probably change the way you do business. I mean, just explain to people the people that don't know about you and your business. I mean, what do you mean by that, and why is that important? Because everyone's talking about AI at the moment. So, what does it mean in relation to your business?
Sure. I'm the CEO at Alteryx, which is a software business. We make software that helps companies pull together different data sources, make sense of it. Most of the business intelligence dashboards or kind of financial reporting, a lot of that gets pulled together in the background with an Alteryx workflow. It's a pretty good sized company. We do a little over 1 billion in revenue annually. We're used by a lot of the largest companies in the world across their finance and operations teams. And we also help all kinds of other fun businesses. For example, we help McLaren Racing pull all their data together.
Wow.
You think of how much data a race car team uses in real time.
Yeah.
So that's what the company does. What I meant with the constraints is I'm a big believer that when you run a business, a lot of what you're doing is trying to manage and optimize against the constraints of
Yeah.
that business. Doesn't matter what the business is. There's a relatively famous business book, I think it's from the 80s, called The Goal, which is set
Yeah.
in a manufacturing setting. And it's essentially a theory of constraints book.
Yeah.
And so when you run a company, your constraints are, do you have enough salespeople? Do you have the right product? Do you have the right investment in R&D? Can you scale globally? Whatever those constraints are, and you manage against those. And typically, I think if you're a good operator, your job is to fix the biggest constraint first. But
Yeah.
there'll always be a next constraint, and then you
Yeah.
fix that
Yeah.
one. And that's just the
Yeah.
job of being a manager and running a business.
Yeah.
And what I think is fascinating about AI is it is such an entirely new set of capabilities. And because it's a technology capability, one of the things that's fascinating about technology is it scales. So if we can identify constraints that AI is going to change, it will create new constraints, but I think
Yeah.
it's going to completely change how people run businesses. The ability to, for example, reason on top of data. AI is really good at that. That used to be something you had to hire people to do.
Yeah.
So now, if I can reason over all of my data in real time at almost infinite scale, well, what that reasoning is going to tell me to go do something. Well, now that's the new constraint.
Yeah.
And so, in our conversation last time, I was thinking about it in terms of even how we staff teams.
Yeah.
Right? We staff teams around constraints. And so, if you think of how a sales team is organized, well, different roles are going to get different levels of productivity enhancement through AI. So if I used to have a team where I had, two of this kind of role and five of this kind of role, maybe in the future I need one and six, or maybe I need three and three, but it doesn't mean all the jobs go away. It means the mix changes because of those constraints.
And let me ask you about something that you've just touched on there. I mean, the kind of the relationship between people and AI, because that is one of the big things that comes up a lot. Um, I mean, given that AI is changing so rapidly, how do you help the people that you employ work with AI when AI changes so quickly? I mean, which is, I guess, it's around upskilling, professional development, and so on. I mean, how do you manage that in the context that you work in, and in relation to the speed of change? I mean, it seems to me that one of the things that AI has done is increase the rate of change. Is that reasonable?
Massively true. I think you have to give people an environment where they can be successful with AI. So it's giving them access to tools and upskilling and the things you mentioned. I think you have to set expectations that this is how the role is going to be moving forward. When you set those expectations, the hard part for leaders is you on one hand have to give people a little bit of space and grace to sort of make that change. Change is hard.
Yeah.
Um, you also don't have a lot of time. So I think you have to set a reasonable window of like, how long am I giving people to start to adapt and make these changes? Or maybe they're not the right people. But for the most part, it's pretty expensive, time consuming, and painful for the business if you just swap people out because you lose all that
Yeah.
knowledge of the business, right? And so what we're doing a lot of is, we're arming people with AI capabilities. We're making it very clear at every level in the company how to help people think about how to adopt these technologies. We're trying to be thoughtful about how we balance these new constraints that these,
Yeah.
the headcount will
Yeah.
move
Yeah.
around a little bit. So how do we take advantage of things like natural turnover? So we don't just immediately backfill and hire when someone leaves. We're thoughtful about like, should we deploy that somewhere else? We start to treat that like an asset and think about where we're deploying AI and how we're doing it. And at the same time, we're being very clear with people. This is the new expectation. I've even told folks in our all hands, this is part of your career going forward, not just here. If your job strategy is, after I leave this company, my goal is to find a company that hasn't heard about AI and take a job there. Like, good luck, right? That is not
Yeah. It's not
your
going to
future
happen.
career. So, right. So here at our company, we're giving you the opportunity and the space to pick up the tools, to learn along with us, and to accelerate your career by being somebody who has had a forward-leaning mindset around AI. It's not for everybody. There are people that don't want to change in every industry during every technology shift. I think we're fortunate being in the technology industry. We tend to get people that are a little more technology forward. But I think that's something every leader has to deal with and has to think through how to manage this level of change, disruption, and opportunity for their business.
And what about, I mean, the disruption that staff are facing is one thing, but clients are also facing disruption as well, aren't they? I mean, what about, how do you help clients deal with this rate of change as well? I mean, what's your thinking around that? Because obviously some will be really on the ball with those things, some will be less so. I mean, how do you manage that issue?
I think part of it is having a point of view. It's a little tough in high disruption times to show up with customers and just ask them like, how do you want this to work? And they go, oh, good, that's how our stuff works, right? They want help. And so we're showing up with a point of view and talking to
Oh,
people about how we think we can specifically come in and help them.
and what is that point of view? Because you have a particular point of view, don't you? I mean, just tell us about that point of view that
So I
that
have a
your
very
company
strong
brings
point
to
of
the
view.
market.
Yeah, I mean, so Alteryx is a product that I describe as being used by people who are experts in data. Think of people who
Right.
use spreadsheets, use Excel, write formulas, can build a pivot table.
Yeah.
We're not typically, although sometimes, but not typically used by people who write software, not by coders and developers. And so a big thesis I have, and that I think is a big part of why I joined Alteryx, is I think the ultimate AI revolution and implementation of AI that drives business value is going to be when the people who know the business, the people that work in these
Yeah.
operational roles, the people in finance and accounting, in supply chain, in purchasing, can apply AI with their knowledge to their data and their processes. That's not the IT team writing a bunch of agents in the back room that somehow do purchasing. Because those folks, they're really smart software developers, but they're not purchasing experts. And so,
Yeah.
what we're in coming to our customers with the point of view is to say, hey, you have these people that are experts in your business and how you do things. How do you arm these people with AI? Most of them at this point have licensed, Gemini or
Yeah.
ChatGPT or
Yeah. Yeah.
Claude or something. There are very few people that are like, oh, I don't have any AI today at work. Most of these people have access to a large amount of data that runs the business. Maybe it's in their enterprise applications. Maybe it's in a large data warehouse. Maybe it's still being sent to them on spreadsheets, but they have access to this data. And so our pitch is, how do you activate those people to be able to use AI to build things? So there's all this, Claude code of the world. Well, those folks don't want Claude code to write Python. They want Claude code to write Alteryx workflows, things that they can see and understand. And those workflows can be easily connected to AI. And so that's our point of view. And again, that enables us to go into a customer where very often they have recently been given the AI budget. The AI budget used to sit entirely with IT, used to
Yeah.
sit with the CIO or the CTO. And I would say sometime around January or February, this year's budgeting timeframe, a lot of companies took some of that budget, not all of it, some of that budget, and gave it to the CFO and gave it to the head of sales and said, use AI to scale your team. Don't hire 100 people,
Yeah.
use AI.
Yeah.
And that CFO went like, okay, great. I've been handed a license to Gemini and told, don't hire a bunch of people, use this thing to solve finance problems. So they've turned to their team of finance experts and said, hey, use AI to solve finance problems. And those people are like, well, what does that mean? And so, to your point, that's where we show up with a point of view and say, okay, well, great, you're finance experts. You understand tax accounting, you
Yeah.
understand tariff accounting, you understand all these things. How about we give you a platform and a tool where you can use AI to build things and enable AI to talk to your data and figure out how to build automation. So not just talk to it one-off, but like how do you close the books using AI in a way that's visible, understandable, repeatable, and auditable. And so we give them those four framings. We say, okay, now you've got a framework to think about doing
Yeah.
finance with AI, right?
Yeah.
You can't go to the CEO and go, hey, we closed the books. We think they're good. We don't know anything about what happened. The robots told us it's all set. Like that doesn't work. So you have to, these
Yeah.
are folks that are professionals. You got to go, okay, these are the things you need to close the books. We understand that. But how do you add AI into that? How do you change those constraints? How do you make the team go faster because you have access to this? And I think our point of view is that's not, again, IT building it for finance.
No.
That's not these kind of quote unquote forward deployed engineers. That's a really popular term right now in the AI industry, right? That's not somebody coming in from the outside who knows how to write software and vibe coding your close process and then leaving. And you're like, I don't know how to change this. So that's the point of view. And again, it should be different for everyone's business, but I believe in a time of change, you have to have a point of view and some conviction about what you're doing and show up and help lead your clients to where they're trying to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you something that kind of sits round that, which has been in the news a lot recently, and that's the kind of cybersecurity thing. I mean, the more data you've got, the more valuable it is, the more people want to get at it. So one of the challenges is how do you, when you're working with clients, ensure that their data and your data and all the rest of it is secure? That strikes me as a very significant problem because that also is not just about the tech, is it? It's about the way people use it. What's your take on how you keep your clients' stuff secure?
Yeah, I think the cyber impact of AI is fascinating and terrifying. I think it's
Yeah.
going to completely change the way that we have to manage and secure our environments, our technology, our APIs, our data, all of those things. Um, Alteryx is a little bit interesting in that we're not a data provider. We're a tool that sits with the customer that works with their data. What we've done is give them more options on how that environment should operate.
Right.
Some of our customers will use what we call push down technology. They write a workflow on Alteryx and it gets pushed down into their BigQuery or Databricks environment. So the data is not leaving their database environment. We have other customers that still deploy on premise. And actually, I think that is interestingly becoming a trend where people are trying to bring some of this stuff back in house. There's been some pretty high profile, I don't want to sort of name names, but there's been high profile enterprise applications where their marketplaces and add-ons have become a susceptible place where intruders have gotten in, and so folks are starting to reevaluate, hey, do I really want all my data out on
It's
the
a
clouds I
very
don't
interesting
control?
question.
Do I want to yeah, so I think, and again, that's our clients' decisions, not ours. We're just there to say, great, like we can deploy however you want to deploy and map into your environment. I also think a lot about how do we ensure that the people closest to the data can be building the data processes to answer the questions that people want to ask about the data, but to do so in a way that is well governed and understood. And so I think a lot about the partnership between IT. I was telling you earlier, our users are typically not the IT and infrastructure people, but those folks are important partners, right? Those are the folks that are securing that data environment, securing the large language model that you're using. And so we also don't want our users to be a rogue force, doing stuff on their desktop instead of using the enterprise assets that are secured and managed by the company.
Yeah. And let me pick up one of the points that you just made. You talked about governance, about AI governance. Well, I mean, it kind of fits in more broadly to governance, doesn't it? But there are some very specific issues around the kind of governance of AI. I mean, how do you see that shaking down? Because that seems to me to be changing quite quickly. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of people that are developing technology to do the governance bit for companies, for example. I mean, I'm not sure how widely deployed that is yet, but that world is changing quickly. I mean, what's your take on the kind of governance piece? Because it's very important for you, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think I've been doing this long enough. It's funny the pattern recognition of like, oh, we've done this a couple times before.
Right.
It's like I joke with my wife. New movies come out and like I've seen this movie before. Like
Yeah,
not this
yeah,
exact
yeah,
movie,
yeah,
but I've seen this movie before.
yeah,
I think if I parallel this to the dot-com boom and the takeoff of the internet, we had all these debates as an industry
yeah,
about how do we secure all these websites? Who should own the website? We should have these debates. Is it IT or is it marketing or is it e-commerce that should own the website? And in retrospect, it's kind of a dumb argument because I don't want my marketing team securing all the APIs on my web infrastructure or wiring up single sign-on or figuring out if my e-commerce is PCI and GDPR compliant. I also, though, don't want to have a website where every time the marketing team wants to put a promotion up, they open an IT service ticket and send it over, and IT tells them when they feel like getting to it, and then they hand code the update. So we sort of created an environment where we said, yeah, like we're going to run these things on secure enterprise infrastructure, but we're going to provide a platform and tools for the marketing team to manage the content, for the e-commerce team to manage the catalog. And I think AI will ultimately end up in the same paradigm. Again, we've seen the movie before. No one wants to live in a universe where we built an AI agent that helps us, I don't know, do Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. And every time a rule changes or our business changes, which is all the time, we create IT tickets and hope someone in IT can recode our Sarbanes-Oxley rules. Like that universe won't work.
Yeah.
There is also no way where the world makes sense where we say, what we've done is we just let every line of business user grab whatever tools they want and connect to whatever data sources they feel like and build AI. Like that doesn't make sense either. So we're going to have to figure out, and again, this is a strong thesis we have, the data should sit in these highly secured environments like BigQuery and Databricks and Snowflake and things like that. The AI environments themselves should be well governed and managed by IT, right? So that privacy and data leakage and all of that can be managed. But we're going to have to give the business tools in that platform to say, hey, I'm putting together a commissions calculation that AI is going to use. And to do that, I have to access data from a couple systems and put it together into a calculation and limit who's allowed to see it. And when we change commissions, which we always do, I have to be able to go in as the commissions manager and make that change. And so I think if we can get that right, we create an environment where governance can exist. Then you can say, okay, well, if someone changes the commission calculator, what's the process for putting that into production? Who should look at it? That's not just going to be IT for security. It's going to be maybe the CFO because it's a commissions agent and that matters. And so I think we're figuring that out. We are figuring it out again. I think a lot of us have seen this movie before. So we're sort of applying some of the best practices from the technologies we've rolled out before. And I think in a lot of cases, we've seen technology be successful when we find this mix of governance and infrastructure and scale, but also empowerment and the ability for the business to use the technology and have it be adaptable.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that was going through my mind as you were speaking as well is that creates lots of opportunities, doesn't it?
A ton. Disruption is the great career opportunity for everyone, but it's also, as we started with, makes everyone nervous. And that's the nature of the technology space.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you about being the CEO. I mean, how do you feel about leading a company, if you like, in the age of AI, where there is so much change, so much uncertainty? I mean, how does that feel? Because it's not just you're not just managing 4 people, are you? I mean, you've got a few employees. I mean, how does that feel? Because it strikes me it could be quite stressful, actually. But what's your take on being the CEO in this particular environment?
I think it's not for everyone. I enjoy change, and I say that knowing that a lot of people don't. When I was a kid, my dad had a job where we moved quite often. Like every 2 years, I would move to a new school and meet new classmates and do new things. And that sort of just became part of my personality. I like when things are changing. I'm a product person at heart, so things changing in the technology space I find fun and interesting. And I like about the CEO job that I don't work in any department. It's the only person in the company that doesn't work in one of the departments. And so I don't run any particular part of the company. My job is to sort of make things happen across the company. And I think change is the right way to think about how you do that across a company. So what am I trying to change about how all these departments do things together? I love that part of the job. I love that I think about how it impacts our product in one meeting, and then I get on the next call and I'm talking about our marketing. And I just talked to the product team. How do I connect those dots and get those people talking to each other? I love that part of the job. I think there are people that are very purely execution oriented that do CEO jobs. And I think for them, they hate change. They want to run the business, optimize at the margins. And there are a lot of businesses that historically have run that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Those aren't the jobs for me. Like if you said, hey, Andy, we have a CEO job, we want you to come on board. It's a really big company. We want you to eke out half a point of margin a quarter for the next 8 years. Uh, I'm not your guy. That would not be very fun for me. Some people love that job. So I think it depends what kind of CEO role you're looking at. For me, and why I think I'm a technology CEO is I think the fact that next year will be different than this year is what gets me excited. And if we do it right, then everybody in the company can, to your point, make that change and opportunity in their career. I think I've had some success in the past of having the companies I was running be kind of career springboard companies for folks, where they were there through a big transition, a big moment, a big set of scaling, a technology transformation. And I find that really rewarding, seeing people get to the other side of that and see their careers be successful
Yeah, it's
because of it.
great. I mean, it's a great thing to be able to do, isn't it? Let me just pick up a point that you made. You talked about, I mean, we talked about opportunity in the past, that what's happening creates lots of opportunity. The thing that goes with that is figuring out how to exploit that opportunity, isn't it? And so the point about change is well made, but there's also an element to the CEO's role, which is not just about managing change, but building, it seems to me. It's how do you build on what you've got so that you move the business forward, so that it's going in the right direction. I mean, what's your take on that building process? Because that seems to me to be the bit that's so challenging, because it's difficult to predict what's going to happen.
I think most CEOs in the technology space come from either a product universe, a sales universe, or a finance universe,
Mm.
and they tend to build in those areas. And I'm a product person by background, and so I think lucky for me right now, this is a massive product disruption in the world. Right, this is not a some kind of financial innovation that's happening, or some kind of go-to-market race that we're in that isn't about a technology shift. And so for me, the building is getting my hands dirty with the product.
Mhm.
I get out and talk to a lot of customers. And again, I'm not out with a blank sheet of paper taking notes. I'm showing up with a thesis for customers and saying, hey,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I believe in this. What are you doing? And does this
yeah,
thesis fit into what you're doing? And let me show you what we're trying to do. And so I'm very hands on keyboard. I don't actually build stuff that we put in production, thankfully. Nobody lets me write production code anymore. But I do have a pretty good handle on what our product does, what we're trying to do with it. And I had the opportunity here. I joined a year ago, December. So call it whatever, 18 months ago. This AI transformation had started. So I got to pick
right.
something where I was like, I believe in this AI strategy at this company. The hard part when you think about the stress of being a CEO is not all changes are things that you're getting to opt into that are a tailwind for your company. So I think AI is a massive tailwind for Alteryx. It's about how do we put the sales up and
Yeah,
capture it.
yeah,
I when COVID hit, I remember getting on the call with one of my investors. I was at a different company at the time. That company did remote software testing. So all software testing went remote during COVID. It was a tailwind for us.
yeah.
My board member said, I just got off the phone with one of my other investors. He runs a live event management company. It's like, what do you tell that guy? Like, we're just not going to do live events for like a year. Um, that's the stress that CEOs deal with that I'm like, I don't know how to, that's a lot of just shepherding people through a disruption and trying to manage a downturn until the upturn comes. I think that's a harder bit of change to manage, but for a lot of CEOs right now, that's what they're worried about, but they're not in that zone yet. They're not in AI has disrupted their business. They're in, I need to figure out how AI is a tailwind for my business and get there quickly. And I think the ones that realize that, I think, are the ones that will come out the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I think your point about having a point of view when you go to customers is really interesting. I mean, that's at the heart of design, isn't it? Is that notion that you've got a perspective on things. It's not just coming from anywhere. I think about it in this way, which I think is really interesting in terms of the process of building a company. The other thing that you mentioned, which I think is interesting, is this idea of looking for the tailwind. Finding the tailwind so that you can ride it seems to me to be something that's a really important way of thinking about this uncertainty that is around, because we don't really know what's going to happen. But if you can find I mean, somebody described it to me the other day as a kind of what did they? It was a demand sort of hose where there was lots of demand coming from this area, and they wanted to ride that demand. They had to change what they did, but they rode that demand, which is sort of similar thing to the idea of a tailwind. It seems to me. How what I'm getting at is, how have your values, your personal values, shaped the way you've led the business? I know you've been very successful, but what is it about your particular values? I mean, you've talked about the design thing, obviously. What about what is it about your values that have helped the business be successful, would you say?
That's a great question. I mean, I think one of the things I would say is true of myself is I think I'm a generally curious and interested in technology
Right.
person. And
Yeah.
so I think when this kind of technology disruption happens, the companies do mimic their leaders. And this is one of the things I think a lot of leaders underestimate. When you go into a company and
Yeah.
you watch how people behave, they behave like their leaders, whether it's intentional or not. It doesn't matter what's written on the wall. You can put up whatever value, and those are important too, but you can write whatever you want on the wall. If the leaders don't embody those behaviors or they embody other
Yeah.
behaviors, the organization starts to mimic those. And so I think being genuinely interested and curious about how AI is going to change how our customers use our products and getting in there and doing it. I write a note to the whole company every week of just what I'm working on and what I'm doing. And I talk a lot about just like things I'm doing in the product, things I heard from a customer, things I thought were
Right.
interesting. And so you end up with I think, a culture of people who go, I'm just generally interested in what's going on in the market.
Yeah.
How's
Yeah.
our product going to change? How are we going to capture that tailwind? So I think that's part of it. And I think that's a little bit inherently how I am. I just sort of like that kind of stuff. Um, I believe strongly in telling people what we're doing, good and bad. I'm not a manage the message kind of person. And that actually is a bit of an adjustment when companies are like, boy, he's not giving us a prepared speech. He spent a month figuring out how to tell us something. He's just telling us like, hey, this is going on. We need to
Yeah.
kind of figure this out. Again, I think that's an important communication style when you're going through fast, disruptive
Yeah.
change. You don't have time to manage the message. That's maybe not how you'd run a large federal government agency, right? So again, not every leadership style is for every environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think those two things in particular for the subject we're talking about make a big difference. You end up with an organization that is hopefully interested, curious, tinkering, figuring things out, being adaptable, and then also communicating while that's happening. Because, I've laid out three kind of main strategies when I joined of what I wanted to do. They were very product centric. The specifics aren't particularly important here, but those three guiding strategies have been in effect for 18 months. Now we've had to make all kinds of little maneuvers as we've learned. Oh, we tried this. This should be different. Customers told us that. We're adjusting, but we're adjusting tactics, not strategy. And I've had to be very clear explaining to people like, hey, just because we lay out a strategy and initially some tactics doesn't mean the tactics don't adapt. The strategy is still the thing we're trying to accomplish. And I think again that kind of hopefully clear, transparent communication helps everybody realize, oh, like we're going to learn fast, and sometimes we're going to learn this message didn't work, or people didn't understand when we talked about it this way. This feature has to change because something else came out in the market. That doesn't mean we're in strategy of the week land. That means we're in adapting tactics to go accomplish the strategy. And I think, again, a lot of companies struggle with that during a time of change. You'll talk to people and they'll say,
Yeah.
oh, we change our strategy every week. And it's like, are you changing strategy or are you adjusting tactics? Because there's a
Yeah.
very big difference.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To pick up your point about curiosity, the other thing about global, I mean, particularly tech businesses that are global, is that different, doing business in Singapore is very different from doing business in LA, which is different from doing business in London. I mean, to what extent is your kind of curiosity a tool to help you kind of, if you like, localize for those different parts of the world? I mean, what's your take on that? The fact that people do want to do things in different ways, have different expectations in different parts of the world. I mean, what's your take about
I think that's a mix of having a culture that's like that versus just an
that?
executive team, right? It's not about like, hey, am I alone intellectually curious on what's different about doing business in Tokyo versus Dubai, right? What I need is people in those locations that are also intellectually curious about how the market is changing, the technology landscape is changing. So I think that's half of the equation.
Yeah,
I think the other half is, I think businesses that are command and control top down, again, maybe very good at optimizing the margins, I think are terrible at adapting to a rapidly changing environment. I am a big fan of a large amount of empowerment and a large amount of accountability. So if you're running our Dubai office versus you're running our Tokyo office, you have some room to manage that business a bit differently. These are different environments, to your point. You're still accountable to go deliver a number, to have a strategy that makes sense. I'm happy to spend time with you working on those things, but like, you don't just take the strategy that we're using in North America and stamp it out with no ability to sort of adjust it to be successful and then blame the process. We say like, no, you're a senior leader running that division. You have
Yeah.
a right and a responsibility to do that. I think that's one of those things that makes perfect sense when we say it out loud. There are a lot of larger companies that don't operate that way,
Yeah.
and have a very top down, follow the process. The process will tell you exactly what to do kind of culture. And I think those companies struggle in times of disruption.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that was going through my mind as you were speaking was the idea of the top-down command and control idea is people that do that see that as a way of reducing risk. That's why they would say they do it. What you're saying, it seems to me, is that a better way to manage risk is to empower people to deal with the problems as they find them, if you like. Is that a fair summary of what you're saying? And have you got evidence that that works?
I would argue that I think you're directionally correct, but it's just different risk. Okay. If
Right.
if I'm a 100-year-old business that's run the same business the same way for 100 years, and again, I'm just trying to make
Yeah.
next quarter look like last quarter. Maybe the risk I'm managing is the risk that my margins flow the
Yeah.
wrong direction by 1%. And so maybe that command and control model manages that risk. Maybe I'm in a highly regulated industry
Yeah.
and I have a lot of risk around that. And so maybe I have a very top down, like, hey, this is how we do, I don't know, pharmaceutical drug approvals. And it's not up for debate. It's a highly regulated, and the risk is we violate those regulations, and it's an
Yeah.
existential risk to the company. The risk in the technology space is not that. The risk is being irrelevant because technology passes you by. The existential risk is, can we not adapt fast enough? And so I'm just managing a different risk, right? I'm less worried about a purchase order coming through that is 10% more expensive than I would have liked it to have been, than people not being able to move quickly, run the events, and get stuff done.
Yeah.
Just a different risk, but you got
Yeah.
to know what you're managing. It's sort of back to theory of constraints. Like, what's the
Yeah.
constraint on the business? What's the risk on the business? How do you make sure you're managing the one that actually matters? I've heard this a bunch about AI adoption, where a lot of big traditional companies initially didn't adopt AI very quickly because they came up with a million little risk reasons. What's the privacy risk? What's the IP risk? What's this? What's that? And these are not, they're not unreal. Like, these things exist. But the other risk was, what happens when an AI native company comes and builds something
Yeah.
that company does, and it's an existential risk to the company. So when you think about those two risks, you start to go, okay, I need to change my ratio a little bit here. I still want to manage my IP risk and my privacy risk, and so I need some policies, but I need to also focus on empowering the team with AI and getting them going. And so, I think every good leader should be talking to their CFO and their GC and the people around them about the risks of the business, and then be thinking about, where do I want to push responsibility down and to people and empower them, and where do I want to own that centrally, because the risk of pushing it down outweighs the benefit of the agility. And I think that's not the same answer for every company at every moment.
And to what extent does the way your clients manage risk impact on the way you work? Because what you're saying is, I look at the problem and then I work out how to manage the risk, which is different from somebody saying, this is how we manage risk. I mean, are there kind of, if you like, cultural challenges around working with some types of clients, perhaps? I mean, what's going through my mind are the big banks that
Yeah,
can be, heavy-handed is the word that was going through my mind. That's probably not the right way to describe it, but they can be, quite a little bit rigid sometimes about these things. But what's your take? Because that's a kind of a cultural thing as well, isn't it?
it could be. I think it's more, at least in our case, thinking about, where are we empowering people and where are we not. So if
Mm.
you take something like information security and cyber, that is not something that I push down into the regions and tell every team, like, hey, you can have your own cybersecurity policy. Like, we work with many of the largest banks in the world. We run a very clear and well managed cybersecurity strategy. We have very clear information protection policies. Like, these aren't up for debate. People have to operate within them. I think we've done that in a way that lets us move quickly and all those other things. But we don't have any problems getting in front of a large bank and saying, like, yeah, we comply with all of your information security
Right.
things, and here's
Right.
our policies. And we don't go to the teams in Dubai and Tokyo and say, like, hey, if this doesn't really work for you, you can just kind of,
Yeah.
figure it out yourself. So there is a difference between running a marketing event, or how we're securing their laptops, or how we're
Yeah.
providing VPN services to them. And so again, that's where, as a CEO, you have to be able to sort of say, these things are non-negotiable, managed top down, important to the business. And these things are things you're empowered to go do. But again, but you're accountable. That's the other part of this. Like if you're empowered, you're accountable.
Yeah.
And so I think it is a mix. And then we got to be able to demonstrate to our clients when we show up and say, hey, look, we're a fast moving tech company that's innovating on our products massively, that has regional go to market that's appropriate in region. We also have world class cybersecurity controls that are mandated top down and have all these certifications and all those other things. And those two things have to coexist.
Yeah. I mean, let me pick up one of the points you've just made then about experimentation, trying new stuff out. I mean, to come back to your point about accountability, I mean, getting people to be or enabling people to be willing to try stuff out. I mean, accepting your point about the overall framework, but getting people to experiment, take risks, try new things, particularly in the application of new technology, particularly in terms of finding new ways to work with clients and so on. There's a kind of a tension there, isn't there? You want people to be safe and and you want people to be held to account, but you also have to accept that they are going to make mistakes. How do you get that balance right, both in terms of the way, well, I guess in terms of the way people work and how you manage people? I mean, how do you do that in that context?
I think it's the expectation you set. So our team is accountable for what they do. That is both accountable for making the changes they need to make to be successful. So you can't simply say, I didn't want to make any mistakes, so I didn't put my sail up, I didn't capture the AI tailwind. I've just always done it like this. That's not being accountable either, right? That's just kind of putting your head in the sand and hoping nothing changes. So people are accountable for the success. They're accountable for the expectations that I raise when I come in of like, you've got to get to this bar and deliver on those things. And you're accountable for making reasonable decisions. It doesn't mean you make all the right decisions. And I tell people this all the time. Like I make bad decisions all the time. It's like part of the job. I joke that half the job of being a CEO is fixing things, and half the job is breaking things that we then have to go fix to make you go in a direction, right? And some of those aren't the right call. And you sort of go like, okay, like again, we're adjusting a tactic. I laid out a strategy, I picked a tactic, wrong tactic, let's adjust. And that's okay. What I don't want is pretending it's not a problem, not fixing it when it's not a problem. But again, that's the culture you have to create. And that's making it clear to people, what's the opportunity we're trying to capture? What's the risk we're trying to manage? And right now, at least in the tech space, the opportunity is massive. The risk is not capturing that opportunity or someone else capturing it at your expense. And so if you are one of my managers, that is what you are accountable for figuring out. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect. And it's okay to be wrong. If you come in and say, hey, Andy, I had this thesis. Here's what we did. I was wrong about this piece of it. We're going to change next week and do it differently. Fantastic. That's good leadership. If you come in and tell me, hey, I'm not paying attention to what's going on, I haven't changed anything in 6 months, and the business is passing me by, you're accountable for that. You haven't made any bad decisions other than the decision not to do anything. But you're right. It is a big adjustment. And I think it's hard for folks. And it's hard for folks because, 3 years ago in our industry, we weren't managing this level of disruption. We were just printing money as a software industry. Like everything was up and to the right. Every company was going public. Every company stock was ripping, right? It didn't matter, frankly, if you were a good leader, a bad leader, like everybody was successful. And then everything changed. And now I would say it's hard. I'd say it's fun, but you gotta be willing to lean in and be accountable and be a great leader and make changes. And I think that's just something we're trying to communicate to all our leaders is the expectation.
Yeah. What's also interesting about that, though, is that you've described a different perspective on risk. Because what you said was the risk is missing out on the opportunity, not making the mistake. Sometimes in more stable stable is perhaps the wrong word, but in more stable times or less volatile times, people think that the risk is making the mistake. You're saying something different. You're saying is that the risk is missing out on the opportunity. That's a big psychological risk for people that have grown up through the education system, through most work experiences, really not wanting to get it wrong, because that doesn't look good on your CV, does it? You're suggesting that that missing the opportunity is a much bigger issue.
For sure. And I think we're helped a little bit in the tech space that there is some self-selection. I think people that like fast-moving industries tend to gravitate towards tech. But even there, I think that's right. That is one of the biggest challenges when I talk to leaders that we're all facing is getting folks to realize that what worked 4 quarters ago is not
Yeah.
what's going to work
Yeah.
right now. It's not
Yeah.
what's going to work in 4 quarters. And standing still is failing. Like that is a hard thing for people who are experienced and successful and view
Yeah.
themselves in a certain way to change. But it is absolutely our responsibility as leaders to make that clear and then communicate to people like you're not going to get it all right. How do we help show people when it doesn't go right? Like, hey, look, we didn't fire that guy on the spot. We learned the lesson. We did something different. But it's a big challenge. It's a big
Yeah.
challenge. I would
Yeah.
say it's one of the things I learned at Salesforce. I was at Salesforce, gosh, a decade ago, maybe in the big run up at Salesforce when it was really taking off. And I will say, I think this is one of the things that was really unique to that culture was people didn't want to go work on the big up and running successful businesses that were just sort of, hey, next year's going to look like last year. Everybody wanted to work on the disruptive new thing that may or may not work, that's going to change this or change that. And I think it really created an amazing culture. And I took some of that approach of just how the leadership team talked about the business and what was important and what we were trying to do and why these disruptive things were important, and the focus put on them. And that even the ones that weren't successful, I watched leaders build products that didn't launch and then get asked to go try to build the next product. Right?
Mm.
They weren't fired. They're told like, hey, let's not keep doing that. It's not working, but we've got to like
Mm.
pick that smart person and go put them on something else. And I think that's something I really took away from that experience was
Yeah.
you have to be deliberate about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just to pick up that point, let me ask you about, I mean, one of the things I like about business, entrepreneurial businesses, is their willingness to take risk, but also to recognize when they've messed up and to adapt quickly and change. Because if you don't, you go out of business eventually. I mean, it's very different to working in government, I think. What would you say is the biggest mistake that you've made? And what did you learn from it?
Well, I've made all kinds of them. There's been lots of them. I would say one of the big ones was actually during my time at Salesforce. I took over a product line, and I think Mark Benioff had much bigger aspirations for that product line than I saw. I built it into a really nice business. Like
Right.
it got healthy. It was a mess when I took it over. I kind of was a Mr. Fix It guy for a while. So I took over this like struggling thing. And I would say it turned it into something that was a pretty solid like B plus. It was positive. Customers liked it. It was growing. We sort of rolled it into the core of the business and made it a nice feature. So my telling of the story would be I came in, took a failing business, turned it into a thriving business and rolled it in. It wasn't a giant business, didn't really move the needle for Salesforce. And I think the ask was, hey, I don't really care if this is mildly successful or unsuccessful. I want you to take a big swing. I want to see if this can be a business changing technology set. And in retrospect, you don't get those opportunities all the time. I was really proud of the thing we built. We worked really hard. I learned a lot about running a business.
Mm.
It would have been more interesting, I think, to take the bigger swing and would have, I think, been a more rewarding thing. I'd add another one when I took over a software company called Acton in the marketing automation space. It was sort of my first real like scaled CEO job. I think one of the things I learned during my first year there was the more people I told about the problem directly, the more people tried to help me solve it. And the more people that felt like I was trying to hide the problem from them, the more people got really mad about the problem and
Yeah. Yeah.
unmotivated to
Yeah.
help fix it.
Yeah.
And so it's a sort of inverse how you would feel, I think, as a leader, especially a new leader at that level. I didn't want people to feel like, oh, we have this problem and that problem, we have all these problems. People know. They just get up in front of people and go like, hey, I know too. This thing's a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
And, it's a big problem. Here's what we're going to try to go do to fix it. You'd be amazed how many people like pick up the rope and start pulling. Again, sounds obvious when you say it. I think it's really hard for people to get up in front of
Yeah.
their company, their division, and acknowledge existential risk, something we've done wrong, something that's broken. And you're always worried everybody's going to quit, everybody's going to leave. People quit when they think that you don't know the problem. When you
Yeah.
tell them I know the
Yeah.
problem, here's what we're trying to do about it, they're like, all right, I can stick around and
Yeah.
work on
Yeah.
that. And so I
Which
think that was another big one that I got wrong for a while.
Yeah, which kind of comes back to the point you made earlier on about the kind of more open communication, isn't it? It's not just talking about everything that's going great. It's also talking about the things that are a problem.
That's right. And talking about them plainly in a way that
Yeah.
people understand that this is an issue. It's one of the things that I took away from, again, my time at Salesforce is Mark and his team use a planning model called V2MOM. It's on the internet. You can read about it. It's vision, values, methods, obstacles, measures. And every year
Yeah.
you write down your V2MOM. My favorite part of it is that you write down the obstacles. And I always tell my
Yeah.
leaders when you do this, you write out your vision, like where are we going to go over the next, year? And it's this big aspirational thing. And then your values and everything always sounds wonderful. And then you write out your methods, the things you're going to go do. And those sound aspirational. And you can just imagine reading these out loud. And you know
Yeah.
that there's people in the back of the room on the front line that are whispering to each other. Yeah, but do they know about this thing? Or do they know that
Yeah.
customers feel this way? Or do they know that that part of the product doesn't work the way they wanted to? And then you get to the obstacles and you get to say, and by the way, I know from talking to customers that they're frustrated about this and this part of the
Yeah.
product doesn't work as well. And it's like instant credibility. Everybody goes, oh, like, okay, like we're going to go do those things, but there's these problems and they know their problems and we've written them down and we're going to go work on
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
It's incredibly powerful. It's again, sounds so simple.
Yeah.
And so I learned from that, like now my weekly notes the same way, like, hey, I saw this problem, working on this, doing whatever. And people go like, okay, like doesn't know all the problems. I'm sure I don't know all the problems, but like,
Yeah.
the guy's got some idea of what's going right and wrong.
Yeah, which kind of comes back to the thing about theory of constraints, isn't it? Because that's the planning model that's based around the theory of constraints, isn't it? Because that's what it's saying.
Yes.
You've got this goal. These are the things that are standing in the way, and this is how we're going to address them, which is
That's
very
right.
simple, but that's really the core of it, isn't it?
That's right. That's exactly right. And it lends such depth to the discussion of like, yep, we're going to do this. We have these problems. And then the last bit's called measures, which is like, how will we know we've been successful? That's the metrics. Like, what are we trying to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you about when you look back on the journey that you've been on, if you were starting again, what would you do differently, do you think?
I tell people, I feel like I've been so fortunate in my career that I feel like if I was told to go back to the starting line and try it again, I'm not even sure I could accomplish it a second time. I just feel incredibly fortunate to have had, frankly, some people take big bets on me. I think that's the big difference is not things I've done. It's things where someone else has said, let's let MacMillan try this. He's like young and smart. Let's give him a big opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, I think taken advantage of those. There are definitely a bunch of things I would do differently. One of the ones I've really changed my point of view on over my life is I went to college thinking I should get a technical degree. I want to be a technical person. Um, in retrospect, like I learned stuff in college that was already 5 years old. I learned everything new about tech when I took my first job. Maybe it would have been interesting to go get like a political science degree or a history degree or something that sort of made me smarter and more enlightened would have been a worthwhile investment. I think in my job early on, I think I would have spent even more time building my network. I know that sounds a little bit cliched, but now at this point in my career, like I think half the value of me as a CEO is the network of people I know and come work with me and that I can reach out and talk to. And I worked with a lot of brilliant people early in my career that I don't know that I built those relationships with. But again, I think my career in a lot of ways has been a success to the bets people have made on me. And I'm sure I did hard work to make those bets happen. But I look back and I think, boy, like one or two of those things don't happen. And I'm a pretty good mid-level manager somewhere. And that's okay. That's a very nice, career attainment.
And
I think the difference between me and a lot of people that are in those roles is again, one or two people that took really big bets on me.
And would you say that part of your philosophy then is to take bets on people?
Yeah, for sure.
And how do you, let me ask you how you do that, because it's easy to say, more difficult to work out who to bet on. I mean, how do you work out, if you like, who to bet on?
Well, I tend to start, a good question. I don't know if I've thought about it as explicitly as that question. So I like the question. I tend to just start working with someone on something. So it's not like I go to somebody and I go, hey, like, I heard you're really good. I'm going to make you the new VP or whatever. It tends to be more, hey, I'm tinkering around on something. I'm working with a few customers on an idea. I go grab a smart person who, knows that tech or knows that customer or knows that space. And I start iterating with them. And then I think what I did do well in my career was I would operate outside the box of my role and just go get stuff done, just go solve problems, just go figure out how to get things to happen. And it's amazing how many people don't do that. And so leaders are like, oh, like MacMillan just makes things happen. Like we give him this problem and like things are happening. So let's give him other problems to start working on. And so I look for that. I look for people that just go, hey, I kind of hear what you're saying. I don't need a ton more direction. I'm going to go tinker with it, figure it out, talk to some people. Maybe some of those people aren't even in my department. I'm just going to go figure out how to get people to go start doing it. And when I see that, I think that's somebody who is going to head towards senior leadership. That's somebody who, again, can have a point of view, can make things happen, can get people to work with them, not because they have to, not because they're in the org chart, but because they've got a vision and they can communicate it. So I look for that. And then I place bets on people with their careers. I start then putting them in roles where they can do that. I will say it doesn't always work. I have sometimes put people too junior in too big of a role and watch the role sort of eat them alive, and I have to kind of come save them and find a way to kind of put them back into some place where they might be successful. So I don't have a perfect track record of doing it. I think it's better than 75 or 80%, but it's not perfect. But it's also some of the most rewarding things you can do as a leader is give somebody that kind of opportunity that somebody gave me to go do something and really change the trajectory of your career and what you're going to get to go do in your life. I think that's a pretty incredible thing that we get to do as leaders if we do it right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also think it's a great way of thinking about the problem, because there are no right answers. There are no perfect answers. There are no guarantees, are there? So what you're saying is I'm taking some bets. I'm going to take a bit of risk here. I'm going to try some stuff out. And ultimately that, people sometimes pretend that they do know what the future holds. I've never believed that we know what's going to happen tomorrow, really. I mean, COVID should have taught people that. But
That's right. That's right.
That's reflected in the way you're thinking about how you deploy resources, in the sense that people are resources, which I think is quite interesting.
And maybe different people look for different things for their leaders, right? For me, I'm looking for people that are smart, accountable, adaptable, empowered, make things happen, take the unprescribed step to go make things successful. The world is full of people that will tell you all the reasons they couldn't be successful.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I have a line I use all the time. I've heard it elsewhere in different variations, but I have, director and manager level people are allowed to point at problems. The VPs have to fix them. And the problem isn't always just in your domain. Like, this is the thing that really hangs people up. And I can't handle when somebody who's a VP level person says, "Oh, I have this problem, and I can't really fix it because I'm also waiting on this other person." It's like, did you go talk to them? Like, if they can't fix it, can you work around it? Like, you can't just tell me, "All right, well, I'm just going to sit here and wait until that person solves the problem." And so when you find people that just do that, there are people that just, "Hey, I found this problem. Part of it's my problem. Part of it's these other two people. I talked to them. One of them said they can fix their bit. The other one didn't. I'm going to work around their part of the problem. And, here's what's happening." It's like, give that person more responsibility. Like, how fast can I put that person into a bigger role?
Well, one of my
and they're telling those people that. That's the other thing. This is not, just to be clear, this is not a license to run over people in other departments. No. It's the people that go, and the person who said they can't work on, like, I get they're busy and, like, we're on good terms. I'm just going to work around them right now. That's the other thing. I aim for leaders who, when they work across departments and solve problems and are empowered, everybody around them is cheering them on and supporting what they're doing, not going like, "Hey, that guy just went rogue and built something that nobody's happy about." That's the other part of the equation that I think is important.
Yeah. One of my early mentors said to me, it's always stuck with me. He said to me, the important thing is to go where the answers are. Which I think is a really good way to think about it. Actually, if that's where the answer is, that's where you go. And you've got to work with people, but focusing on how you get to the answer seems to me to be a useful kind of guide, if you like. Let me just ask you one final question before we wind up. I mean, it's kind of a bit like the question before last, but asked in a different way. If you were to give some advice to a rookie CEO, somebody starting out on a journey like yours, in this kind of day and age, when there's such a lot of change and uncertainty and what have you, what would your most important piece of advice be?
I tell this at every level. Find the really hard, icky problems and get interested in them and work on them. I'm amazed how many people go through their careers trying to avoid the big, icky problems. And so I think I made an entire career out of like, "Oh, that's a disaster. Let me go work on that," and find it interesting and figure out how to fix it. And people notice that. Senior leaders notice that. Mid-level leaders notice that. And so I think a big part of my career was doing that. And I think that's true even at the CEO level. When you join a company as a CEO, you're usually there for a reason. It's not often, sometimes, not often, people go, this is going so incredibly well. We thought we'd bring in a new CEO. Maybe public company succession planning. That's about it. So you've been brought in to do something, right? So what's the biggest, messiest set of problems that people aren't fixing? Roll up your sleeves, participate in solving it. Don't act like you know all the answers. Like bring in people around you. But like once people see like, oh, we're actually working on the hard stuff and fixing it. Again, you'd be amazed how many people like pick up part of the rope and start pulling to sort
Yeah.
of help your side in the tug of war that is the market. And so I think that more than anything helps. I think the other thing for senior leaders, especially CEOs, is you have to hire an amazing team and you have to empower them and remind yourself you don't run a single department in the company.
Mm.
You don't run sales, you don't run product, you don't run finance. And if you find yourself doing one of those things, you have a problem.
Yeah.
And
You're the
so that's the other
bottleneck.
thing I tell a lot of CEOs. Yeah,
You
well,
become
or
the
you don't have the
bottleneck.
right team. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not the job. The job is getting the whole company doing stuff together and not running a piece of it. And that's what's really unique about the job. It's like no other job. I have functions rolling up to me. I run none of the functions, and many of those functions are places I never worked. Like I didn't have a job in finance. I have a world-class CFO that works for me. So that's a different relationship than you have in almost any other part of your career where
Mm.
you work in a function, your boss does the job that you do, but at a more senior level. And so having CEOs really embrace that as a capability, I think is a big change for first-time CEOs.
Yeah. Yeah. Andy, thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. I mean, it's been a fascinating conversation. I mean, it's not our first conversation. Obviously, we've talked about some of these things in the past, but I mean, I really appreciate you making the time to come and share that. I mean, some really useful bits of advice in there for people that are watching. And I think also one of the things that's nice about what you've been is there's quite a lot of reassurance in terms of the things you've been talking about. And I think a lot of people are anxious about some of the things that are happening at the moment. But your approach is quite reassuring. I think it's probably quite reassuring for your staff, but also quite reassuring to hear that actually what you're focused on is the opportunities, not the kind of anxiety about the problems. I'm not saying you don't want to deal with the problems, but you get my point about looking
Yeah.
for the opportunities and how important that is. So thank you for kind of sharing that really, because I think that's a really powerful message for people.
Oh, thank you. It was really fun to be here. I always enjoy talking to you, Paul, and being on the show. So thank you.
Appreciate it. See you soon, Andy. Bye bye.